That was the Minister in charge of Government Communications, Felix Kwakye Ofosu, updating journalists on some of the government policies since they assumed power last year. I'm joined in studio by my colleague, Jude Duncan. Hello, Jude. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon to you.
Now, you have been monitoring the sector minister. What were some of the takeaways for you?
He touched on basically every sector of the economy, bar health, because I didn't explicitly hear he mentioned anything particularly on the health sector, but from transport, which has generated significant public interest following all of the issues regarding traffic and mobility concerns. He touched on, happenings within the presidency, which is something he's been very, vocal on. He delved on issues on Galamsey. He touched on issues around corruption and the ongoing case involving the former Finance Minister Kenneth Oyata and his detention with U.S. law enforcement authorities. But however, this was a clear or a very different kind of engagement we've seen in the ongoing government accountability series. So for those who've been following, when this happened, you'd usually see a minister who would come and sort of brief, journalists at the presidency before questions will be taken. But I get the sense that because of also the role of the government communication minister, who sorts of touches on every other sector by nature of his role, the format this time around was different. He rather opened it up for journalists who then sent questions and he provided useful responses. So back to your question, he touched on all sectors of the economy and also happenings at the presidency with very little on health. Very well.
Now let's talk about journalists. And now he mentioned that the recent incident which involved the Class FM journalist, the officer in charge has been interdicted and says that's the first step in taking action. Did that come to you as good news?
Absolutely. In the space, we've always been calling for the protection of journalists in their work. We heard the president actually also say same when he visited some select media houses. So it was great. Beyond that, he also touched on other initiatives like the Media Fund, which according to him is in the works. He also talked about the fact that journalists need to be supported to be able to report on issues accurately and without any fear. So generally his concerns on supporting media in line of their work was clearly spelled out, because again his ministry has oversight on issues relating to the press and media.
But on the transportation sector, he mentioned that recently there have been concerns about long queues at various terminals. And he said the transport minister has summoned leadership of GPLTU for a meeting tomorrow to address these concerns. He mentioned that during the Christmas period, remember the buses that were given out by the state transport company to address these challenges. Now, we are done with the Christmas festivities. We are in the new year, and you come to work in the mornings and you see long queues at the various terminals. Now, he said there's going to be a meeting with the GPRs. What are you expecting to come out of that particular meeting?
Again, you're right. The issues around traffic control and mobility has become topical in recent weeks as a result of, the lack of vehicles. People have gone on, some section of this, of the public have gone on to attribute, the monopoly of GPRTU. According to the minister, there's a scheduled meeting between not only GPRTU, but other stakeholders within the transport industry who are going to deliberate on the way forward. He mentioned that the decision by the management of STC to give buses for intra-city engagement was a temporary measure, and that a long-term solution is being sought. What he also disclosed was that there's an ongoing engagement between the transport ministry and a firm in Egypt on the possible procurement of buses to aid in mobility and also movements of persons from one place to another. So he sort of acknowledged the issue, and said that government was minded about it and was working effectively to address that concern.
On the economy, there was a question about Ghanaians not reaping the benefit of what they have done in the last 1 year. And he mentioned that for him, as a minister himself, he's saving over 600 cedis on fuel. But what you make of the answer that was provided by the minister?
The question was really about the fact that despite the gains,
economic gains,
and with regards to the improvement in the indicators we see on the economy, inflation, the exchange rate, prices still remained the same. And the question from the journalist was to the point that particularly utility, prices are still going high and still affecting the standard of living of the ordinary Ghanaian. And he sought to use himself as a personal, experience, share his personal experience. Now, according to him, the vehicle he used for his 2024 campaign to become MP is the vehicle he still uses. According to him, before the election, he would have to buy fuel 2,000 cedis to fill his tank. It's now somewhere in the region of 1,400 cedis. So like you rightly said, he saves about 600 cedis, and that is money saved. And according to him, for people who use vehicles, that is, a significant amount of money to save on, usual expenditure. And he went on to make the point that you can't rather discount this as,
not feeling the benefits.
Exactly, not feeling the benefits of the economy. But he was also quick to admit that a lot ought to be done, to further improve the standard of living and, of course, reduce prices to a level where the ordinary public can, experience or feel it more.
Let's talk about the issue of illegal mining. He mentioned that NIMOS has been working day in, day out to ensure that they get rid of illegal miners who are currently on our water bodies and forest reserves.
Yeah, of course, you don't expect a press briefing of this nature without issues around Galamsey. It's the #1 issue, affecting the environment when, issues around the country, governance come up. And he said that NIMOS remains the arrowhead with which government is, using to fight Galamsey. He also assured that a lot of work is being done behind the scenes. He mentioned that what woke him up today was an update on NIMOS's effort to address, Galamsey-related concerns in the country. So his was more of an assurance rather than, telling us some practical steps being taken, with Galamsey. But however, very briefly, he also touched on the issue around the Women's Development Bank. I know you're interested in that. According to him, each time he went to his constituency, it was the one issue that drew significant public interest among women, because we know, access to credit, microcredit was an issue specifically for market women and traders. So according to him, government is committed to it. He mentioned that the Vice President, Her Excellency, Professor Nana Jane Opoku-Agyeman, is leading the charge in that regard. So all well and good, it was rather the 24-hour economy, he said, should be fully operational
by the close
of the year. But on the Women's Development Bank, he assured that, a lot of work is being done in that regard to bring it into fruition.
We would have to end shortly. What you make of the concerns on the Commander Sugar Factory? Now, he said the Trade Minister is expected to take a turn sometime next week, and they're going to have more on that. Now, this is one project that many people, especially those of us from the Central Region, are looking forward to having it running to provide jobs for the teeming youth in Commander and Earth environments who are currently out of jobs.
He basically just accused the NPP of, neglecting the project. In his own words, everything was set before this government left office in 2016, and the NPP's neglect of it left the place in, disrepair. And according to him, work is being done. He also mentioned that some funding would be needed to, improve the state of the place, and some feasibility and assessment, structural assessment would also have to take place. So he also again assured the public that government is minded, government is committed to revamping the Commander Sugar Factory, which in his view would create jobs and improve the general, economy of the country.
Thank you so much, Jude, for
pleasure.
joining us. Now, this has been our live coverage of the Government Accountability Series. Now, today, the Minister in charge of Government Communications, Felix Kwakye Ofosu, took his turn. Next week, we understand the Trade Minister is expected to also take a turn at the Government Accountability Series. Thank you for staying with us here on Channel One TV. I'm Hawa Idrisu Mustafa. I did this with Jude Duncan. Thank you for watching.